Good morning and welcome to another video cast from Henley Consulting, the specialist management consulting firm for the FPD display industry at $125 billion in total. And today we're going to start this week a couple of presentations about the outlook for both LCD and OLED. Just some thoughts. It's not intended to be fully comprehensive, but my sort of general take on where the business is now, the state of innovation, the state of the players, and where do we go from here. So out of the 125 billion, about 80 billion, but declining, is the LCD marketplace. The primary driver then is supply demand and then the impact of that on pricing. There was a massive uptick, as most people know, due to COVID, learn from home, work from home type behaviours that drove TV panel prices and hence everything else upwards in 2021. At the end of the pandemic, that came crashing back down to a little bit over marginal cost. That stayed that way for quite a while because we're still in sort of systemic oversupply. And then primarily Beijing engineered a slight price increase through the middle of this year, but it's not clear that that's going to stay solidly through the end of the year because it's not really supported by fundamentals. So there's been slightly higher pricing through the middle of the year, Q3 being important for peak demand for shipping of displays for the Christmas period. But that's not really reflective of an underlying situation. And then it's really worth saying now that with the exit of the Koreans, the capacity picture, which is about 390 million square meters in total of LCD. So these players here, which are some of the leaders, and there are clearly a whole number of others. This is roughly the 2023 capacity figure, millions of square meters, is dominated now by the Chinese. So the top three here I've put in red for China, BOE, China Star and HKC. Who's HKC? Well, I have a separate video on YouTube on the second tier Chinese, but HKC was a monitor player in China that vertically integrated backwards into display making. They've got 4 large Gen 8 fabs and hence 38 million square meters potentially if they were loaded. It's not clear that they are fully loaded, but this is capacity figures. So you've got the top 3 Chinese, then the 2 Taiwanese that I call the Taiwanese twins because they are so incredibly similar at a 30,000 foot level. So clearly they're different in culturally how they behave. There's slight differences in their businesses, but they're both moving towards downstream businesses, both moving towards automotive as being a primary lever and sort of non-TV, non-IT product. They have to play to some degree in these marketplaces, but they're trying to do so to a minimum. And then I just happened to put Sharp on here as the biggest of the Japanese, but at only 14 million square meters. So substantially smaller than the others. So you can see here that China really dominates the LCD leaderboard at the moment. But the picture I wanted to paint is actually LCD's not giving up. And what I found fascinating is I started trying to think about a multi-dimensional space of all the different types of innovation that you could expect to see from an LCD, for example. And LCD is trying to innovate and push the boundaries on every one of them. So, you can say raw size, which has often been a sort of differentiator. Well, TCL now and China Star is pushing TV sets up to 98 inches with LCD. Wide color gamut, for me, the two that I always see as being differentiating are color gamut and high dynamic range. And those two continue to be an incredibly important trend, and I publish materials on those two as a trend quite regularly. But wide color gamut here is either narrowband phosphors or quantum dot films or other, so there's a range of different ways of trying to get to an LCD to wide color gamut. Then we talk about high dynamic range, where in particular now I'm thinking of mini LED, but you can also think of other ways to get to high contrast. BOE for a while had a dual cell idea where they stacked two a monochrome and then a normal LCD on top of each other to try and increase the contrast, and then you pump up the backlight and get high dynamic range. But those two themes there continue to be important, and LCDs continue to innovate on that. At times they have been interested in sort of curved LCDs, and then actually Flex Enable takes it one further, where they start doing sort of LCDs on plastic substrates and start doing really curved for automotive and other applications. There is still innovation going on weight, on bezel, on all sorts of other bits and pieces to try and make LCDs more competitive, and on frame rate for gaming, which has proven to be quite a consumer valued benefit also. So the notion that LCD has given up and that they're not doing anything is far from the truth. So this is sort of core areas of innovation for LCD. And of course, low power. There's another one which will probably play into this also. So then if you think about it, really, what you could say is that the best way of segmenting out the sort of players and what's going on in the LCD market is to break it by country, because that's probably how the themes break out. So the Chinese at the top. Yeah, so the three Chinese, and they will probably consolidate their position at the top of the leadership board, right? So they're already leading. They'll put down additional capacity. There's a bit of a worry I have that in the TV business, BOE and China Star become very dominant anyway, because they really do control the largest amounts of capacity. But then I do expect to see that HKC in particular will try and move up the leadership board a little bit. I mean, if you're an LCD, then you want to try and sell some sort of premium LCD product too. So you might want to see improvements in oxide technology and a deepening understanding of poly, and just basically sort of hardcore tech development for devices to support the LCD business. Now the Taiwanese then are probably capped out. They're probably not going to build new fabs per se, so they're 30 million square meters each. So they're trying to take their businesses either downstream or sideways. They have always been looking into niches. They were investigating 8K. They are strong players in automotive displays, so they will always try and seek to get out of the mainstream, highly commodity marketplaces. And then I think Japan is basically now they're going to look to try and earn money from their previous technology. They're both technologically very strong, but their capacity very small. And both Sharp and JDI actually think now will be a harvest strategy to try and get deals with others, particularly the Chinese, to make the most out of the technology that they have. So the theme that I say is important, and this is all shown here on 4K TV being 140 million sets here, so roughly 140 million here. And so LCD, the bars for LCD of wide color gamut and high dynamic range here are shown. Those are the two sort of trends that I see as being continuously important across the whole display industry, but also important in LCD. So being colorful and being very bright are something that is continuing on in the LCD marketplace. So this is where the LCD business is today. It's $80 billion and slightly declining. China is the top three places and really looking to secure their position, and the two Taiwanese next, and they're probably going to move towards niche markets and try and keep out of the major commodity markets as much as possible. LCD continues to innovate on as many dimensions as possible, and I think that's really fascinating, right? It's far from given up, and color range and high dynamic range, wide color gamut and high dynamic range are important ones amongst those. And I think the segmentation along country lines probably leads you to the most obvious groupings. Hope you found that was interesting.